Hi everyone, welcome to Magic Carpet Life, your weekly wonder trip into the infinite discovery of who you are. I'm your host and guide, Tiffany Josephs, and I am here to romance the world to a higher love. Why are you here? Have you thought about it? Have you written it down? Have you shouted it from the rooftops? Well, this is your time. The world has never been more ready to receive your unique magic. And you can think of me as your cosmic cheerleader on your path to discovering just how true that is. So thank you so much for tuning in, and let's get started. Hi, Nick.
Hi, how are you doing?
Guys, I am so happy because today I have my first bright dude on the carpet, on the couch with me, Mr. Nick Hemmert. I said before we pressed play that I didn't want to mess up his name. Hemmert. Okay, Nick Hemmert is an advocate for possibility. This is really beautiful language, by the way. So let me just make sure that you are all catching these words. The words behind the man. Nick Hemmert is an advocate for possibility, a giver to good things, and a curator of all things awesome. The Center for Awesomeness, chief strategist and co-founder, has a keen ability to navigate between disparate worlds and dive deeply into complex business and technology opportunities while connecting people to solutions that are profitable, on budget, and on time. I love that. He is a multidimensional entrepreneur, technologist, licensed spiritual practitioner, Tony Robbins Master University graduate. Yes, he's walked on fire several times, and an appreciative inquiry facilitator. Totally exciting. Must talk about that. Nick is passionate about fostering the deep connection between the head and the heart through the power of questions and the challenge of action. Amazing. All right, thanks for listening, guys. We're done here.
Have a great day. Hope that worked out for you.
Nick, thank you for being here, and thank you for
Super
who
excited.
you are.
Super excited to be here. Excited to chat.
I met you about a year ago. I think it was September
Roughly-ish,
a
yeah.
year ago, and it was Denver Startup Week, and a mutual friend of ours was having a book launch. And I saw you standing there, and the first thing I saw was your red heart. And I said, okay, this is fascinating. Let me just see what this is all about. And tell everybody here what you were doing that evening.
So at that evening, I was a sponsor of her book launch.
Okay.
And so I was supporting her ability to bring out the idea of mental health and creating impact within entrepreneurship. And so one of the practices that I have is our cards. So we have these things called high five cards. We also have cards that are called the Awesomeness cards. Okay. And it's a practice. It's a practice of being able to acknowledge other people, give them a high five, or just tell them how awesome they are. And at that point, that night, I was basically we provided a handful of those cards to everybody that was in attendance and challenged them to write a message of why they wanted to give a high five to another person that was there. And it was great to watch that kind of unfold, to have that be the beginning of the evening, or to have it operate throughout the evening, this idea of how we can appreciate people we may or may not have never met. Yes. Maybe that we've, come in contact with before and just reconnecting with or meeting for the first time. It was a really cool experience to kind of watch that kind of unfold.
Yeah, the room was buzzing. It was filled with, it was Startup Week energy. Denver Startup Week, for those of you that don't live in Denver, maybe you have your own Startup Weeks. It's live. It's happening. There is so much electricity in the air. And there you were, facilitating this beautiful experience for gratitude and for magic. And this is what you do. So it's an aspect of what you do. Tell us all about the Center for Awesomeness and maybe what inspired this. This is the container that Nick gets to play in, and your wife, who's a co-founder. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, her and I do a variety of different experiences, and so whether that's a workshop, whether that's a card, whether that's a conversation, we wanted to find ways to bring about what I call prompts. So, when we're in the process of wanting something in our lives or wanting this idea of, what people might consider awesomeness, how is it that we're going to get there? Like, what are we doing to cultivate that within our world? What actions are we taking? What creative things are we doing? And I think most people can kind of lose track in the business of doing in our life right now, especially with all the things that are always happening all the time. It feels like we're always going.
Yes.
I'm a parent of 2 kids. My wife works in addition to what we do together in this entity and in this magic place of the Center for Awesomeness. And so what is it about creating that for ourselves? Where's the intentionality there? And so being able to create these kind of experiences, through our cards, through our stickers, through this heart on my chest today, through an experience we'll have called the Ascent this summer, where we'll take a group of people up a 14er. And then we'll also have a challenge with that as well, that'll get people to think about this concept of the whole life. What is it about you, what is it about that wholeness of you that brings about that idea of awesomeness? Because awesomeness isn't really just the idea of this, everything's great, everything's cool, everything's unicorns and butterflies.
Yes.
It's an idea of how do we roll with the direct opposite of that, and what prompts us to get back into this place of the good, of the awe. Awe is about finding reverence mixed with the feelings of both good wonder and also fear and challenge. And so that idea of awe, which I think we'll talk more about later, is really what this container, this Center for Awesomeness, is about. It's how do we spark that? How do we create that? How do we make it something that we regularly can participate in?
So you're really holding both sides. You talk about, the wonderment and the sense of awe that we have that's really expansive, right? Where you're like, yes. And then the other side, which is the compression, the gotta go through the eye of the needle. And you say here, the challenge of action. I love that. It's visceral.
Yeah, and the more and more way that I chat with people about this idea of awesomeness, this idea of it's both and, right? It's not just this. It's not just the Lego movie. Everything is awesome. It's it is also the fact that I did potty training this weekend.
Yes, and, congratulations!
and
high five.
Yes, absolutely. That's all of that, right? And as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as humans, that is the part of the overall experience. And so what is it that we're doing in that experience to make it a little bit more maybe joyful, appreciative, generative, fun.
Yes. So you talked about your red heart. For everybody listening that are not able to see, when I first met Nick that evening, he had he has this beautiful red felt heart, which, by the way, is like perfect. It's a perfect heart. Did you cut that yourself?
I did cut it myself.
I am impressed by the symmetry. Great job, bravo. Tell us the story, this beautiful story of what the heart is about.
Absolutely. So my grandmother had a saying, put a smile on your face and a song in your heart. And as part of our experience, when I say our, my fellow cousins and myself, that phrase was given to us on all of our birthday cards, all of our Christmas gifts, all of our experiences. So
she was consistent.
This was a consistent message that she had provided to us. And so she passed away in December of 2016 after a long battle with Alzheimer's and dementia. And so it was very hard those 4 years to kind of to know the person that I knew and to know the person that we knew, kind of to dwindle away from us and to not be there. But in all reality, she was there because she had planted that seed within us our entire life, whether it be through this message, through the many other intentional things that she provided for us as her grandchildren. And so for me, as a way to kind of spread that message into the world and to bring that into this Ultra-Busyness, as a prompt for myself, as a way for me to remember every day that the more important things that I want to do is bring about that joy, that smile, and that song that I get to live. And so I appreciate you asking, about it, and appreciate you noticing it before. But that's kind of the background of it.
Well, I'm sure you have like 100 people a day asking you, what's the red heart for?
Yeah. Last year, just had a little over 300 people ask me.
How did you count?
I just kept track, just kind of a little notch, to know, who's asking, who's not. And it's not important about the number.
Of course.
It's more important about the fact that it actually was a practice. It was something that actually, had, we talk about this thing called impact, right? Like,
what is that?
What does that even mean? Right?
It's so conceptual.
What is that? And so to me, it's in the micro things, it's in the smaller things that I can begin to measure that impact. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to measure the ability for me to share that story. Not only was it a gift for myself to share that, and be many traditions for their grieving process, they actually wear a ribbon or they wear something as a way for people to know that they're experiencing that. Mm-hmm. And in some traditions, they don't want you to actually ask about it, but in this case, I actually wanted people to ask about it, but I didn't forcefully come up to you and say, ask me about my heart.
Sure.
No, I mean, but those people were intrigued enough to begin to ask, and then that gives me an opportunity to tell that little micro impact, that little small impact that I had, and that not only my grandma had on myself, but on the people that I interact with.
What is your grandmother's name?
Helen.
Helen. Mm. So did Helen have a heart? I mean, she had a heart, but did she wear it?
No, she didn't. This was so as she was I'm one of 11 grandchildren. Our family is rather big. We had a very intentional life. Like you don't know that was what was going on, but my grandparents were very intentional. Our Christmas parties were epic. They were 3 days long. You'd come in on Friday and leave on Sunday, and
wow.
We had all these different rituals throughout the weekend, and you had 20-something people in a house, and you would celebrate all this stuff. And it just kind of the birth of and then during that we had things we did every year, right? So we were always thinking about what we were going to do for Christmas, whether it was, the sleigh ride and singing songs, singing caroling throughout the town that they lived in, to having t-shirt contests, to all of these different things, right? And so every Christmas, about October, we would start to begin to ask ourselves, what are we going to do this year, right? And so a few years ago, my cousin Tony wrote a song. It was Put a Smile on Your Face and a Song in Your Heart.
I was just going to ask if anybody ever put that in a song.
Yeah, and so he put it into a song. I
won't ask you to sing it, but we might have to get Tony on there.
Yeah. No, he didn't sing it. We actually hired a person that professionally sings.
Oh wow, and produced it.
To produce it and to have it, and it's beautiful. And I'll tell a story about that in a second. But there was that intentionality of having they planted that seed of having something every year to celebrate us as a family, yes. Right? And then so the smile on your face and song in your heart kind of continued. And then when I was asked to speak at my grandmother's services, we cut a heart out for everybody. We made hearts for everyone to have, and then we gave them to them as a gift from her to not only remember the song but also remember the phrase. And so that's kind of where it came from.
Wow. And then what did you do with the song? So was it a secret? Was it a surprise? And then on Christmas you passed it out to your family?
Yeah. So we made we had these beautiful letterpress 8x10s made with the lyrics on them. Mm-hmm. We put them all in frames, and then we had the song produced by an amazing musician, Troy Horn, who's actually here in Denver. It's been a very, very magical gift. I mean, so much so that the other day my son, we get in the car, go to school. I think we all have rituals, and we go to school, and so I said, what song do you want to listen to today, bud? And he's like, Heart on My Face. And I said, what song's that? He's like, the Heart on My Face song. And I was like, did you mean Smile on Your Face, Song in Your Heart? He's like, yeah, that one.
Yes.
And we hadn't listened to that in probably, 6, 8, 9 months. And it took everything in me to actually be able to make it to the short drive to school,
of course,
and collect myself. But now it's become such a beautiful remembrance and a prompt, for us to not only celebrate us as a family, but now my son sings that song, and soon my daughter will, and all of my cousins and their kids will sing that song, and so it's just a continual way for us to bring about when people talk about, impact, they talk about values. Like, what does it mean to live out your values? Like, what does that actually mean? And to me, this is like that tangible, kind of practical way, or one of the ways that we can bring that about.
Yeah. Well, I think it's beautiful that Helen had, her legacy, one, and how her legacy was able to really influence these future generations within your family. Like, to me, that's the real definition of a matriarch. Like, I hope, I pray, I think about this lately. I've been thinking about, because my kids, my son is 11 and my daughter's 9. And, the conversation of college has started to come up from my son, and the conversation of, he wants to go live in Europe and play for Premier League. And I'm like, whoa, slow things down here. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to think about legacy yet. And we do these things day to day because we're present and we love. But to think like of that, like impact, what am I leaving with my children?
Yeah.
My children are going to be leaving this house. And the truth is, I'm leaving things all the time. And what am I leaving? There's the big things of, yes, when my kids leave the house, or when, I move on to this other next phase. But when I leave the grocery store, or when I leave the wherever, in public, this is why this prompt is so powerful.
It's I've always been fascinated with how these bigger things become, a realistic, practical. Is probably the better word, pragmatic, type of use, right? I go to all these classes, you learn all this stuff, you do all these, personal development, spiritual growth types of activities,
right.
But then you got to make it your own. You may read all this stuff, but then what is it that you can embody about yourself to make it your own, and then fill yourself with that awe, with that reverence for yourself, with that reverence for your life, reverence for the situation. And then that, I think that leads to the ability to have that presence that you're talking about, right?
And how do you personally stay in that?
Well, it's not a matter of staying. It's a matter of remembering, right? And so for me, it's not like the if I'm holding myself to the standard of always being in it, that's not really the reality of life. Like,
right.
Like I just shared earlier, we did potty training this weekend, right? So like that's an aspect of life, and so we have to go around and pay attention to how is she ready? Like all that. You pay attention, and then you're like, oh no. And more like something else, right?
Yeah, right.
That happened, or that an accident happened somewhere. But but for me, it becomes a remembering practice, like a prompt every day, a daily practice that I have every day of prayer, meditation, some form of good reading, uplifting reading, and some questions, that I'll ask myself pretty regularly around, what's working, what's not working. What's for me to do, like that type of, it's bringing again back that prompt practice of like, and then when I get into it, when we get into the stuff, as a friend of mine, Andy, calls it the contrast, like as we get into the contrast, right?
I love that word.
The opposite of what we want, right? What's that way to bring us back, to where we want to be. Right.
Yeah, I've been working with this a lot myself and usually it's in retrospect. It's after I have responded or reacted in the way that I wouldn't have wanted to from a high place. But what is when I'm in the contrast, how can I hold both sides in that moment and just be really full, and we call it the range. How can I be really full in the range and not give my power away and not but just be in it. It's hard to want to deal with some of these opposite, and that's why I think ritual, especially when you have a family, because you cannot control anything. Okay, family and business, which both things you do. You're a family man, you're a businessman. How have you uniquely tied those two together?
A lot of practice.
Again, the practice and the prompts and the meditation.
A lot of consistency, right? A lot of of being in that, of knowing, of putting myself purposefully in those experiences. So for example, I love the outdoors. Colorado has these amazing things called 14ers. They're 14,000 foot peak and above mountains. There's 54, 55, depending upon who what list you look at. And I've done about 38 of them. Right?
Wow.
I aspire to do them all. But for me, the exercise is more about how am I in the shit? Like, how am I in the challenge? How am I when I'm literally taking steps that are like this at 13,800 feet and I can't breathe? Where does my body go in those situations? And it was through that experience of that allowed me to kind of put myself into check a little bit, when I'm back here at home, right? Because I'm totally going to lose my cool. That'll happen. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's just part of the experience, especially when something doesn't meet the expectations that I have for our day, for a business opportunity or whatever that is. But I think this is the hardest thing for anybody is to be okay in that constant, back and forth. But for me, it was about developing a practice of knowing what I'm like in the good, and knowing what I'm like in the bad. And feeling and experiencing and navigating that contrast, right? And knowing what what not only that feels like within me, but also is, like the words that I use, the actions that I take, sounds very cerebral, but for me, I think that the practices, the meditation, the mindfulness, I think that brings me back to.
You place a lot of importance on this space between the head and the heart. And you use this language in your Center of Awesomeness practice.
Yeah.
Do you teach this practice to, who's your ideal client? Who's showing up at the Center of Awesomeness, or who are you showing up in their space?
Yeah.
What does that person look like?
For me, the work that I love to do the most is with groups of people.
Okay.
And groups of people that have something in common, that are working on something, right? Or maybe they're individuals coming together for a unique purpose, right? They may not be a team working at a company, but they may be a group of individuals. For example, in our event this summer, they called the Ascent. We'll bring a group of people together that have never been together, and we'll come together as a team to hike a 14er here in Colorado.
So intentionally perfect strangers.
Yeah, totally perfect strangers. I'll know who they are, but they won't know each other until we start to get together as a team and develop that rapport, right? And then with organizations, in whether they're small teams or teams of 50 people or so, being able to orchestrate a conversation and create the questions that allow them to start to be able to work together a little bit better, maybe, or identify what it is that really brings them alive, what brings about that awesomeness or that awe, within their work. And how can they bring that about? So that's really the ideal person, the ideal people that come to us are, it's very two different kind of dynamics.
So you really work with the magic of synergy. Is that, would you say that?
Yeah, no, I think that there's definitely I think there's a power in, having people, experience something not just by themselves.
Yes.
And so this is all through this other intentionality work, like whether it was my family Christmases, whether it was me working on projects for corporations and companies, as a technologist, the real magic starts to happen when they start to figure out what it means to be a team, or work together as a unit, because you're not alone in this whole thing. I think that's where people begin to start to see a little bit more.
So what are some of the juiciest questions that you would ask? Let's say that you will be asking, spoiler alert for those that'll be on the Ascent with you, but what are some of these real heart opening, getting the shield, getting that armor to just, it takes a bit to warm people up to that, to fuse together and create that. What are some of the juicy questions that they could ask themselves or each other to facilitate that space?
Well, this is going to come across as very simple. Right?
I love simple. That's the best. Please make it simple.
Yeah, but a regular question of what am I grateful for? You know, what do I appreciate? This figuring out, having that regular practice of like asking yourself that question, maybe journaling, maybe not, maybe just, maybe if you have a partner in your life, or you have, coworkers and things like that, sharing that question, back and forth. And from there, it creates this little bit of commonality where you can begin to ask maybe another question of, why are we doing what we are doing? What is it about this work that we're doing that we really love? What was a project? What was a a situation or circumstance that we've had in the last 6 months that was really, really great? What about that was great? What worked? What didn't work? It's really about the taking the simplistic and dissecting these situations a little bit more to kind of maybe create the patterns and create the habits and create, and figure out where those prompts are for yourself, right?
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it's wonderful. Are you kidding me?
I'm just talking. I'm just kind of feel like
people show up and you welcome them into the flow. Because connection is actually a natural process.
Yeah, there's an aspect of humanness.
Yes,
right?
it's an inherent thing that we
actually have to connect. But then then I always ask myself, well, what does that actually mean, right? What does connection actually mean?
Right.
A lot of times right now, there's a lot of people that will walk around like this, and they don't, you're right there in front of me, but they can't figure out ways to actually have that eye contact.
Yes.
Right. And that, and that's a very troubling process. And then how do we start that dialogue or start that practice of beginning to say, it's okay to look at people in the eyes. It's okay to say hello to people. It's okay to, acknowledge them. Right. I think that people have kind of forgotten that a little bit. And that's, that's also this all sounds very, I don't know what the word. That word's not coming to me, but
it's simple.
Yeah.
Getting back to simple. So, you're having the Ascent this summer, and this will be you and your wife are climbing the 14er.
My wife has done this experience, and she is going to support us.
Okay.
In the process. So ahead of the actual hike, we'll do a 6-week challenge.
I see.
And so she will be supporting us on the 6-week challenge, and that 6-week challenge is about creating regular habits in your world that enable that ability to ascend, right? To move forward, to get out of that idea of being stuck, or to get some traction on some things. And so she'll support us there. A colleague of mine, a really close friend of mine, Anna, will be one of my hiking partners, so to speak,
guides,
leaders.
Yeah.
On that actual event day.
So it's culminating. So the 14er will literally be
correct.
Look what we've done,
yes.
And then it's climbing down the mountain.
Correct.
So let's talk about this because this is. I always find this with hiking and with climbing, especially a 14er. It's life.
Yeah.
You've got all these metaphors, right?
Yeah. Totally.
So with life and with climbing down the mountain, what advice would you give as a guide, life guide, and literally trail guide? For climbing down, once you've had this mountaintop experience, how can one effectively come down?
Slowly. Very, very, very slowly.
Sure.
And this is like you're right. The goal of actually any hike, climb, ask any mountaineer, is to get home safe. It's not actually to summit the mountain. Because that's only halfway through the actual journey. The hike back to the car is just as complicated as the hike to the summit. And so the getting back is actually it's a lot lighter. It's a lot easier. You want to try to run through it. You want to try to sprint back to the car.
Yes.
But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, your body doesn't necessarily want you to run down a mountain. It's rather painful. Your knees are a little sore at that point.
Shins and knees,
and so so that's that idea of slowing down, right? To get to the area to getting back to the car. There's so many metaphors in a lot of this, but that's why I just love this idea of not only the 14er hike, but of hiking in general, right? Any hike. any journey is meant to, the goal isn't just getting to the end.
Yes.
You know, it's how
it's
you get
part
out.
of that contrast,
Yeah.
the ascent and the descent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have found in working with people, whether it be through coaching or life design or even just conversationally, everybody's searching for the high. We all love the high. We love the ascent. Well, we might not love the ascent, but we certainly love the view once we are there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard to want to come back down. And we were having this conversation before we started filming here that to me, though, that is the mastery. When we can say, yes, this is, great endorphins up here. I'm loving the high. And I call that a lot in the awakening experience when we have when we realize who we are and what we can do as humans, we have those moments of pure potential where we're like, oh, I get it. I see. I can't believe it. The scales have fallen. But then it's like, how do we go back down? And I distinctly remember this moment when I've never climbed a 14er. But in my mind, in my imagination of it, when I reached this point in my life where I thought, oh, I get it. I see the light. I know what I'm going to do. Thank God I got through that part, because my ascent in this particular, it was like a big one. You have like the baby ascents and then you have the big one. And that was when I left corporate and I had gone through the first 2 years of my business, and there was this level of things had culminated. And then I looked back and I thought, oh, thank God that's behind me. And then I got to the top and I saw peak after peak after peak after peak ahead of me. And I realized I'd have to go back down into the valley and do it all over again.
Yeah.
And it was a bit maddening for me because there was resistance there where I thought, hell no. I'm done with this. I just want to go back to the simple life and not have to be, when you say, challenge of action. I'm done with this. I'm just going back to sleep. And yet I'd never be satisfied with that, truly, right? We'd never be satisfied if we just went back to indifference. But living a life of passion is peak to peak to peak with valleys in between. Especially when you have a life purpose with kids and home and family.
Absolutely.
That to me is my greatest art. It's my greatest magic is how do I have this home life and nurture who I am as a mom and as a wife and as a creator, as a entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That's...
Yeah, and for me it's an exercise in amazing time management. Right? Of
you just get real practical.
You really got to get practical and really super intentional about what gets on the calendar and what doesn't. Right?
What is your favorite practice for time management? Everybody's got some of their own.
Use it.
No, but here's
the challenge of action, right? It's like, the idea of, for me, I know if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't happen.
Yes.
And that includes everything from the meetings that I go to the clients that I work with, to the daily practices that I have, right? If it's not on the calendar, I won't remember. I won't have that prompt to remind myself.
It's a prompt.
That's there, right? And so the challenge really is using the calendar. And we want to create more around like the coloring of the categories.
Sure. What color should my work be though, Nick? What do you say? What color should my work? What color should my home? That's what I want to know. The grid.
What feels good to you?
Yeah, right.
I mean, and if that works for you, cool. But and at the same time, just using the calendar is really hard. And that's been a very interesting exercise lately, where I've had to say no to things because I just don't have the time slot for it.
Yes.
I think that many entrepreneurs can have, especially conscious entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs, impact entrepreneurs, whatever, have a huge heart and this idea, and they want to say yes to everything, and then then they look for the hack or the tip or the thing to get them to the place of where they want to go, and really just like analyzing
to make shortcuts to their choices.
Yeah, is this real? And there's totally an exercise of figuring out what works for you and what doesn't, right?
Yeah.
But giving yourself the opportunity and the space to actually play with that, to say, okay, this really doesn't work. Like I tried this journal for 6 weeks, didn't like it. Okay, cool. sometimes, I might get really, before I'd be like, no, I spent $30 on this journal, so this is going to be the best damn 6 weeks
I'm
of my
making
life.
this work.
And it's like, no, 3 weeks in, I'm like, this doesn't work. And then I go and find another one, and that works really great, right?
Yeah.
But it's never going to be, I don't think for me, it's not a matter of finding that perfect process, because with the kids and with all the other stuff, the amount of uncertainty that I go with, the dynamicness of life is ever expanding and changing. Yeah. And so the only thing that is consistent for me is my calendar. And so that's kind of the way that I manage that. But I've come to that knowing over being beaten over the head multiple times of like, it's not in the calendar.
Sorry.
Doesn't happen.
It's invisible. Yeah. That appointment is invisible.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. I like the idea.
But I'd like to, do something with that.
Do you think it's possible to plan for awe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and necessary.
It's absolutely necessary. Because how are you going to take on that valley, right? Mm-hmm. That human experience of saying, oh shit, I got to get back to the car, or what do you mean I got to go down to the valley, or what do you mean I got to go to the grocery store to get the groceries? Like, now they've made it so we can just order them online and we can just pick them up. Like, there's all of this kind of dynamicness that kind of happens. But for me that control of what that intentionality is of my words and my actions is really what I kind of go back to. And then that's how I bring about that feeling of reverence, that feeling of reverence, especially mixed with fear or wonder, right? Mm-hmm. And how do I stay attached to, or knowing that I'm going to bring about that idea of awe more often, and just because it feels good, I'm naturally kind of drawn to it more. And I've just kind of figured that out. And so, but just think about it, the things when you have your regular practice of gratitude, or when you do something fun with the kids, or your husband, or you want to naturally go more towards that. So why wouldn't you look to figure out ways to create that to duplicate that?
Create that feeling and intend for that feeling, especially now that it's summertime. Yeah. Because, so we are recording this the day after Memorial Day, which means summer is here. My kids have a few days left of school, but I'm getting on an airplane and going to the ocean on Friday, and all I want to do is play. Mm-hmm. Like I opened up my calendar yesterday to plan for the week, and I just was like PLAY, P on Tuesday, L on Wednesday, A on everything else just does not matter. And I felt real mischievous about it and real kind of rebellious about it. And I think, it's life. There's seasons of this, but planning for awe and planning it, what it does to the human body, what it does when we can reset is incredible. And it's needed when it's
required. It's like essential.
Yes, it is required.
The more and more that I get away from these practices, because we all do. Yeah. Last night my son got up in the middle of the night 3 times. So it's like, okay, so today do I really want to get?
There's no bags under your eyes. I'm impressed.
Actually, in this situation, my wife, was on duty for that. But the night before, my daughter got up in the middle of the night.
Why do kids do that? Right? Stay in bed.
Because they want us to experience this opportunity for awe, both the good and the not so good, right? And so they are our teachers in an essence. They want to remind us of this is reality. This is the way things are. So did I feel amazing about getting up on Sunday to do my practices and my reading and stuff? No.
Yes.
But I was able to get up today, just to be able to do that, because it is something that's important to me. It's part of my play, because I know that when I don't do that, it just makes for a more challenging experience, more challenging day.
So you talked about hiking a little bit. Mm-hmm. What else are you really into right now that's lighting you up for your awe, for your play?
Yeah. So earlier this year, I had the opportunity to work on a mentoring program for a group of women technologists. Okay. And so the idea of beginning to craft what it would be like for 3 hours of time for a group of people to come together and have a connection moment, to be able to get answers, to get practical tools, to fill this like 3 hours with like the most value, to use that word, that we could possibly get.
They're there. They're showing up.
They're there.
Ready to receive.
They're here. They're ready to actually do it. And so to be able to create an experience with questions, with a handful of questions, and a little bit of training, for some mentors, that was really great. To be an advocate for possibility, to kind of come back to that, for what that means. So creating those experiences where where I can go about being in a room of people that are trying to get to their own summit, trying to get to their own whatever that is, and they're sitting there wondering like, oh, I think that I need this calendaring tool in order for me to do this. You may, I think that's the end, that's part of the tactical process, but there's also the big why part.
Of course.
And so, but then there's the why, and then there's what are the aspects of that why? What brings that purpose alive? What are the situations and circumstances, stories in my life that have brought that alive? So I really love geeking out on the how can we create those experiences? How can we prompt for those? How can we all be advocates for possibility for ourselves? In a non-fluffy woo-woo, type of way, right? Sure. There's a lot of science in, positive psychology, neuroscience, a variety of different areas now that are beginning to bring all this stuff into the world. I'm not an expert in those things, but I enjoy reading about them and then figuring out ways to bring that into the practical for people that I come in contact with, for organizations that I work with, all that stuff.
You are a real catalyst for that process.
Yeah.
What is it about the power of the question, or the power of the prompt?
Well, it's for me. I think it creates a lens upon the way in which you're going to experience the next thing, right? Mm-hmm. So if anything, the high five cards, for example, if whenever I say to you that I appreciate you, or even just doing this like we did earlier, right? Mm-hmm. That is like it uplifts you, right? Mm-hmm. And so it creates a new perspective, a new lens on the way that you're looking at things. And so I think questions are the powerful tool for that, and looking at your situation, circumstances from that lens of the question, the question of how, like for example, if you want to ask yourself, why did this go wrong? That's a very interesting lens to look at it,
sure.
right? Because you're presupposing, or you're assuming that it's all bad, right? Or you could say, what was good about this?
So, is there a nomenclature, or are there words to use that are that produce really great outcomes? So, you just said, why did this go wrong versus why? This is a contrast again, right?
Yep.
Why did this go wrong? Half full, half empty, kind of thing. Yep. Are there words that people could create in a practice of questions? Mm-hmm. People are always looking for journaling tools, right? In the morning, I do morning pages as part of my practice. Sometimes I just get nothing going on. I mean, I might remember some dreams and jot down some, but most lately, because of the way my life has been, it's like, I need to do this today and I need to do this today. Yeah. It's very much in a production, space. But the questions, if I could ask myself questions every day to open myself to the underlying layers of things, are there really great words to use instead of others? I look at it from a perspective of how are the words that I'm using positive and purposeful. Positive and purposeful,
right? Mm-hmm. And so are they affirmative?
So do they feel good and are they directional?
Correct. Do they move me in a direction? What went wrong today? That's maybe purposeful to get to a root cause of something. But then, what about that was good, and how could I use that to create something better for myself? You can see that I'm asking myself something that'll maybe put the lens by which I look at something on there. So as far as words go, what brings me alive? What makes me feel good?
What makes me feel alive?
What about this is great? How could I acknowledge myself for what came about today? What do I want to create today that has an impact? But using those more, that more positive and purposeful language as opposed to something that's going to look at what's wrong or what's not working. That helps us to keep that, eye on the
yeah,
direction
because it's inevitable that there's funk. There's just always funk. It's kind of there with us, right?
Yeah, it's
running alongside the
yeah.
feeling good.
Yeah.
And so, and using intention again to feel out the both of those.
Yeah, yeah, and knowing what actually over time what feels good to you, right? But yeah, gratitude, appreciation, acknowledgement. Asking myself, what's good about this,
What would Helen do?
Yeah, what would my grandma, what my grandma say about it? For me, I listened to that song, Put a Smile on Your Face, Song and Heart, the song we wrote for our family. I listened to that. It's not necessarily a question, but it definitely puts a lens on my practice to say, okay, cool. Like, this is really what matters. This is really the direction that I want to go today. Yeah.
So I want to ask you another question, which might move in a different direction, but I think some listening, some watching might be in this place where they work with their spouse or their partner. Either creatively, even just creating a home,
totally.
But specifically in the container of business.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who are getting ready to start a business or already are currently operating a business with their partner?
Yeah. And so my wife and I have worked together on and off from part-time to full-time for the last 5 or 6 years, and we are always figuring out new ways, because with the kids, we're always expanding into something new and different all the time.
Never the same.
It's never the same. Now, at our core, I'm always this type of person. Monica's always this type of person, and just kind of having an understanding of what that is. An example, we used a tool called the Enneagram recently
sure.
that helped us to get a perspective on it. And there are hundreds of psychographic tests and other things that you can do, but just love languages is another great one that we've used, right? To just bring
especially for couples,
totally, to bring into our awareness of what is it, love languages is preferences, right? So how do we prefer to be in relationship? For myself, my wife is words of affirmation. I'm physical touch. And so we just have to, we're always navigating that. So
are couples ever the same thing? Does it ever work out
that way?
No,
because that's why you're together. If you were the same, it would get really boring.
Oh, it'd be so much easier though.
It would be easy.
But no fun.
Yeah, it would,
right.
I think that's I think that's what brings about the dynamic in our relationship is that we're very different people. Right.
Sure.
And then we get to honor and appreciate what is it about them that's good. So to your question at work, how does this apply to work? Okay, great. Well, my wife and I have things that are called committees. We have things that we may or may not enjoy doing, but we essentially have taken responsibility for. Right.
Okay.
And then we
between just the two of you.
Between the two of us,
So there's tasks.
So there's tasks that needs to happen. An example is that Monica loves the opportunity to, she. Let's see, the doorbell just rang. So
I
now,
know. We have
now
to
I'm
pause.
really, really excited. I'm gonna let this be like a little moment, where
the dog's about to jump on the couch.
Where I'm gonna take a breath and
pause for a commercial.
Pause for a commercial.
They're just gonna run in and be crazy for a minute. Hello, puppies.
Hi.
We're gonna be really calm.
Really
calm. You guys settle down.
Really calm. Really calm.
Thank you, Stephen.
Of course. So how does this apply to the work to working together, right?
Yeah.
It's that ability to have that awareness about each other and the courage to discover what it is that
I love
we
that
like,
word.
Right?
Courage to discover what you like.
Yeah. So
courage to discover your differences.
Totally.
That can be frightening in a partnership.
Absolutely. So it's that awe is that mixed feeling of wonder and fear, right? And so how do we bring in that? How do we have practices or prompts or rituals or being inquisitive and curious about who we are and what we like, right? And it doesn't have to be permanent. It can change, just like with I was sharing about committees. We tend to have shifting in our committees since we operate as a couple. And
so you have a skill set. She has a skill set. She'll take on the committee that she might, because she's like a PM, right? That's kind of her hat.
Yeah,
and
she loves that. She loves to be able to take on those. She's really good at marketing and strategy. Okay, so she likes to write. She likes the word. She likes all of those. Some of those details, and so that's really her committee. I may not be great with words, but I love to be in conversation with people, and I love to talk, and I love to pitch and catch with folks and talk about like what's working, what's not working, what's specific to them. And so we have these different. We brought into awareness in our life together over 8 years the intentional practice of discovering this stuff about ourselves, right? And then figuring out ways to just be with that. As damn hard as that is, I mean, it's hard
to be with that. That's
just
good.
To just be with with knowing that these are some of our preferences. This is who we are innately. Knowing which win is what.
When you met your wife, did you know you wanted to work with her?
I know I wanted to be with her.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was number one. Like the minute that I saw her, I knew that we were going to be married, and I can still remember her walking down the street, on our first date as we started dating, and I knew that was going to happen, right? And then, and quite frankly, in our life now, it's hard. It is with 2 kids, with her, her primary source of work is full time, and so this.
And yours was too till recently.
I've been on the Center for Awesomeness full time doing this for about 1.5 years.
Wow.
And so and I took a 2-year break from entrepreneurship, went and worked for a company, and then just came back to it, right? And so it's always that ups and downs flowing, with that process, right?
Wow. The dogs just came in from.
Hi guys.
They're
Ladies, guys, I think
they need hydration. Okay, they got some water. Hello, puppies. Nick, this has been absolutely fascinating. I want to close and make sure that I ask you, we talked about your red heart, we talked about your definition of awe, which I think is wonderful because I work in that realm as well, just in a bit of a different way. But tell me what you would say to this question. What do you think is the most beautiful thing about humanity right now?
I think that the being in technology for as long as I've been in technology for the last 10 years. You could say that the last 10 years have been the most innovative time for technology in the world. With the introduction of social networks, with the introduction of having a smartphone, with the ability of having all of these tools, right? And what's really fascinating right now is we're in this place of, I think people are discovering that these things are just tools. And they're beginning to reconnect back and ask themselves questions about what's really important to me. Why does this matter to me? What can I do? I was thinking about something very simply recently where, the ability to share photos with my family or have a video conference. My family lives in Ohio, we live here. That wasn't of existence 10 years ago.
Sure. Right?
And so it's fascinating on how we have, we've come together in some capacities, but we've drifted apart. So I think that there's this exciting time of like, what does that mean for all of us as individuals? How are we going to spark that awe within ourselves now that we know that we have all these tools? Yes. The last 10 years we've been figuring out how to use the damn tools, right? And so now that we are coming into a little bit of awareness, I say we, and I speak generality, I hate doing that a lot, but I think that you can see that a lot of people are seeing this process.
Well, you can say we, because there's very few people who are not engaging in these tools now.
Yeah, and now that they have a comfort level with them, now that there's a little bit more certainty wrapped around it, now they're I think that, with people are asking questions about privacy lately. People are asking about like, what do people know about me? What do they not know? And those are really great questions, to start to sit with, and to say, okay, what do I want to participate in? What do I not want to participate in? What feels good? What doesn't? What do I want to create for myself? What do I want to put on my calendar? What summits, what ascents do I want to participate in? How am I going to handle this valley that I have to go through to get to the next summit? all those types of questions. Instead of letting tools run our life, and having that thing in front of our face all the time, how can we leverage that to then create this world that we want to have?
That's the power that we have now, the power
Correct.
to choose, because the potential is so great for both ends. Again, that contrast.
Totally.
There are the people who would say the world is going to hell because the kids are not, these generations, they're on their screens, they're learning disconnect and isolation. They don't know how to look people in the eye. And then you can see the other side of that says the potential has never been greater for connection.
And it is an and. Because 20 years ago they were saying, well, what are those kids going to do with that music? Or what are those kids, what do you mean they can go out and, there's always this interesting dynamic.
There's always the older generation looking at the younger.
There's always that generational stuff, happening. But are we as humans creating, as individuals and family members, entrepreneurs, dads, moms, are we creating those experiences for where the kids can have that educational experience on the iPad, or on the tablet, right? And they can also learn how to go and have fun with their friends in real life with play, right?
Yes.
How do we construct both of those situations and circumstances, and allow them to have that type of capability?
It sounds like, from what you've been sharing today, the way to do that is through intention. That's how you do it. That's how you hang with the
surprise.
It's intention. Yeah. And we know all the ways, especially if you have kids or if you have a business, you know how to be with that how to be with both sides.
Yeah.
Powerful stuff. I need to high-five you. Thank you. That was a hearty high five. That was a good one. That was like I need to be ready for that. Okay, now a slow-mo one. For those of you watching, you can see the lights, the fireworks in between,
And I'm sure there'll be something in post that'll make...
Stephen, we got to add that.
That'll make a slow-mo.
Add some special effects to that. Nick, thank you so much for being on Magic Carpet Life today. I was inspired by everything that you said about questions, about intentionality, about your own journey, and just how you've pursued your curiosity. And you're not afraid to go into the unknown and be with that and it's incredibly inspiring. For those of you listening, for those of you watching, please share in the comments below what inspired you. Are you currently in a business formation or running a business with a partner? Do you have any questions for Nick that you want to ask? Post them in the comments below, or you can fly on over to magiccarpetlife.com and join the conversation there. If you loved what you heard today, make sure that you subscribe, listen, rate, review, hang out with me. I'm here every week on the podcast and on YouTube. So hang around. It is my pleasure to be here, and I will see you next week on Magic Carpet Life.